Chapter 1. Clean like a lie, the apartment was spotless, the kind of clean that makes your skin itch. No dishes, no clutter, no fingerprints. Like somebody erased a life with a soft cloth, but Wolfe saw the confession in the corners, dust gathered in the wrong places like footprints in fresh snow. A room can be tidy and still tell the truth. This one was tidy on purpose. It was a Thursday afternoon, which meant Wolfe had just descended from the plant rooms and was in the mood to object to something. On Thursdays he inspects his orchids with the air of a magistrate reviewing petitions, and if a petal is out of line, the rest of the world is likely to follow. I was at my desk, pretending to reconcile accounts when the doorbell rang. Fritz was occupied with a source that had his full moral attention, and Theodore Horstmann was upstairs among the orchids. That left me on the stoop stood a woman who looked as if she had been assembled with care and then shaken slightly out of alignment. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back too tightly, gloves clutched in one hand, though it was not cold. Her eyes were steady but exhausted. "I must see Mr. Wolfe," she said. "It is urgent." "Most things are," I told her. "Come in and let's define it." She entered the brownstone with the wary glance of someone who has already decided to trust us and resents the necessity. In the office she sat without waiting to be asked, then seemed embarrassed by the boldness. "My name is Lila Hart," she said. "My brother is dead." That's a line that has opened more cases in our office than any advertisement could. Wolfe entered at that moment, vast and composed, and settled into his chair as if it had been designed around him. Which, in spirit, it had. He regarded her with cool attention. "You believe," he said, "that your brother's death requires my involvement?" "Yes," she replied. "The police say it was suicide." "It was not." Wolfe's brows rose a fraction. "And upon what do you base this certainty?" She inhaled slowly. "On cleanliness." That got my interest. It got Wolfe's as well, though he showed it only by steepling his fingers. "My brother, Daniel," she continued, "was not untidy, but he was human. He left cups on tables, books open, a jacket on a chair. When I went to his apartment yesterday morning, it was—" She searched for the word sterile. "Sterile is a medical term," Wolfe said. "We are not physicians." "Then," she said firmly, "it was wrong." She described it. No dishes in the sink, no laundry in the hamper, every surface wiped clean. Even the framed photographs had been aligned precisely along the shelf. The police had found Daniel Hart in his bedroom, a single gunshot wound, the weapon in his hand. "They say he was depressed," she said. "They say he had debts, but they did not know him. He was fastidious in his work, careless at home." "That apartment?" She shook her head. It looked staged. Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. "Inspector Kramer has closed the matter. He calls it open and shut." Wolfe's lips tightened faintly. He dislikes open and shut cases unless he has opened and shut them. "Archie," he said, "telephone Inspector Kramer. Inform him that we are about to inconvenience him." I did so, Kramer responded with language that would have bruised softer ears than mine, but ended with reluctant permission to view the premises. We arrived at Daniel Hart's apartment in a narrow building on East 72nd Street, just after 6. The hallway smelled faintly of furniture polish and something else, disinfectant. Perhaps the doorman eyed us with professional indifference. Inside the apartment, the first impression was indeed of order. Not the pleasant order of a man who enjoys his belongings, but the severe order of a showroom. No shoes by the door, no mail on the console. The coffee table bare except for a single magazine placed square with its edges, the cushions aligned with military precision. Wolfe stood just inside the threshold and did not move for a full 30 seconds. I have learned not to interrupt that silence. It is not empty. It is calculation. "Finally," he said. "The dust." I blinked. "What about it?" He pointed. Not with his finger, but with his eyes, toward the baseboards near the window. A faint line of grey clung there. "Observe," he said. I crouched. The baseboards had been wiped in broad strokes, but the dust remained in the corners, gathered in little crescents where a careless cloth had not reached. "Whoever cleaned," Wolfe said, "cleaned for appearance, not for thoroughness." "That's not unusual," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed, "but it is deliberate." He moved further into the room. The bookshelves were immaculate, yet when he ran a fingertip along the top of a tall volume, something I doubt Daniel Hart ever did, there was a faint residue. "Recently disturbed," Wolfe murmured, "not habitually maintained. In the kitchen the sink shone too much. The drains smelled faintly of bleach." "He shot himself in the bedroom," I said. Wolfe nodded. We went there. The bedroom was as neat as the living room. The bedspread smoothed tight, pillows arranged. On the bedside table sat a lamp, a clock, and nothing else. "No glass of water," Wolfe observed. "Maybe he didn't need one." Wolfe ignored me. He examined the carpet near the bed. There were faint marks, lighter patches where something heavy had been moved and then returned. "Furniture displaced," he said softly, "then replaced." The police report, which Kramer had reluctantly allowed me to glance at, said Daniel Hart had been found on the floor beside the bed, pistol in hand. Wolfe stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, his eyes half-lidded. "A room can be tidy and still tell the truth," he said. "This one is tidy on purpose." Lila Hart, who had followed us quietly, spoke from the doorway. "Then you see it." "I see effort," Wolfe replied. "And effort is rarely expended without motive." She stepped forward. "Will you take the case?" Wolfe did not answer at once. He walked back into the living room and stood before a small writing desk. It was empty save for a pen placed precisely parallel to the edge. He opened the drawer. Inside lay a stack of papers arranged neatly, and beneath them, a square of dust in the shape of something that had been removed. "Archie," Wolfe said. I leaned over his shoulder. What was there? "Something rectangular," Wolfe said. "A box, recently removed." "A gun box," I suggested. "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "Or perhaps something more interesting." He closed the drawer gently. Miss Hart watched him, as though her brother's fate balanced on his next breath. Wolfe turned to her at last. "Madam," he said, "your brother's apartment has been cleaned not to honor him, but to erase him. Suicide is private. This," he gestured toward the immaculate room, "is performance." Her shoulders sagged with something like relief. But Wolfe continued, and his voice cooled. "Before I agree to involve myself, I require facts. What did your brother do?" She hesitated. "He was an accountant." "For whom?" "For a charitable foundation." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Name, the Kessler Trust." He held her gaze. "And was he, perhaps, untidy in his accounts?" She stared at him. "Number, he was meticulous." "Meticulous men," Wolfe said, "are often inconvenient." He moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To dine," he replied, "and to consider whether Daniel Hart's cleanliness is worth my appetite." It was, I could tell. As we left the apartment, I glanced back at the immaculate room. It looked peaceful, composed, almost virtuous. But the dust in the corners told a different story. And Wolfe, who prefers his truths unvarnished, had already begun to strip away the polish. Chapter 2. Dust has a map. Dust isn't just dirt. It's a calendar, a travelogue, a quiet witness that never blinks. Wolfe ran a finger along the bookshelf, clean on the spines, dusty behind them. The couch legs had halos of dust, but the rug beneath looked newly shaken. Someone cleaned for the eye, not for the world. Meaning someone rearranged the scene after the body stopped arguing. If you ever want proof that civilization is a thin coat of varnish, watch a homicide lieutenant try to be polite in a well-kept apartment. He'll stand there with his hat in his hand and his patience on a leash, and you can practically hear him thinking about the time he could save by shoving you out a window. Lieutenant Rowe was that kind of polite. He met us at Daniel Hart's apartment the next morning, stiff in a dark suit, his face already tired of our interest. "This is still an active case," he said. "But it's also still a suicide until somebody shows me a fact that isn't atmosphere." Wolfe regarded him as if Rowe had tried to sell him a counterfeit orchid. Atmosphere, Wolfe said, is often composed of facts that your profession ignores. Rowe's jaw tightened. You're welcome to look, but don't touch. Wolfe nodded, which is his version of consent. Then he did what he had done the night before, only more slowly. He stood in the doorway and let his eyes drink the room. I stood behind him with my notebook open and my own eyes busy. Wolfe doesn't like to be hurried. He also doesn't like to be wrong. Those two dislikes make him thorough. Dust, Wolfe said softly. Rowe looked blank. Dust. Wolfe stepped into the living room, stopped by the bookshelf, and ran a finger along the back edge of a shelf. Careful, precise. He held up the finger. A faint grey line clung to it. The spines, Wolfe said, are clean. The space behind them is not. So, Rowe demanded. So the books were removed, Wolfe said,
Nero Wolf,
and
the
replaced
ability
without
of
attention.
a wristwatch.
That tells
A
us the
jeweler
cleaner
shows
did not live
a
here.
watch that only runs
It
when
also
someone
tells
has
us he was
it.
searching. He did
On the
not
back,
dust for
there was a
tidiness.
hair
He
thin
dusted
wire
around his own
length. The
impatience.
watch is tied to a
Rowe's
person.
eyes
When a
narrowed.
jeweler
You
kills,
think someone
the
rummaged?
of the story.
I think someone did a
Hope you
great
like
deal,
it.
Wolfe
Comment
replied,
next
and
and
attempted to
so
make
far
it
too.
invisible. He moved to the couch. The couch was placed with show, room symmetry. The floor beneath it, however, was a different story. Around each leg was a faint halo of dust, undisturbed, as if the couch had sat there for months. Yet the rug beneath the couch, what little could be seen under the frame, looked freshly beaten, the nap lifted, the pattern bright. Wolfe pointed with his chin. Observe the contradiction. The couch has not been moved recently. The rug has been disturbed. Rowe frowned. Maybe the cleaner shook the rug in place. Wolfe's eyes flicked to him with the mild scorn of a man hearing a poor theory. One cannot shake a rug beneath a couch without moving the couch, unless one has very unusual fingers. I stepped in. So the rug was cleaned before the couch was set down. Rowe stared at the couch legs. You're saying the couch was placed after the rug was cleaned? Yes, Wolfe said, and since Daniel Hart did not arrange his living room like a department store display. Miss Hart's testimony is credible. This arrangement is not his habit, it is someone else's work. Rowe's face tightened. Why would someone rearrange furniture after a suicide? Wolfe turned his head slowly, like a man adjusting a lens, because it was not a suicide. Rowe's gaze hardened. That's not. Wolfe waved him off. I said it is not. I did not say I have proved it. Your patience, Lieutenant, is irrelevant. Rowe made a sound through his nose and crossed his arms. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Wolfe went to the writing desk again. The drawer we had examined last night was still shut. Wolfe didn't open it this time. He looked at the handle, the edges, the underside. Archie, he said. I got down on one knee. Under the drawer handle, where fingers pull, there was a faint smudge. Oil from skin. On one side only, the rest had been wiped too clean. Someone opened it, I said, but didn't wipe underneath the handle. Correct, Wolfe said. Inexperience, or haste. Rowe leaned in despite himself. So somebody rummaged through his desk. Wolfe's eyes drifted toward the kitchen and bleached his sink. We went into the kitchen. Rowe stayed in the doorway, tight with the knowledge that this kind of observation makes his job longer. Wolfe sniffed the air, like a man evaluating a source. The faint smell of disinfectant still lingered. Archie, Wolfe said. The drain. I looked. The drain ring was too bright, and at the edge of the metal there was a tiny bead of something dried and pale. Bleach residue, I said. Wolfe nodded. And why bleach a drain in an empty apartment? Because one wishes to remove biological trace. Rowe's expression changed. He didn't like where this was going. If there was blood, it would be in the bedroom. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps in a sink, if someone washed. We went to the bathroom. The mirror shone. The faucet shone. But along the base of the toilet, in the angle where porcelain meets tile, there was a faint line of dust that had not been disturbed. Wolfe noticed it without bending. Cleaned high, Wolfe murmured. Not low. A cleaner who cleans low is a resident. A cleaner who cleans high is an intruder. Rowe exhaled hard. All right, you've convinced me somebody cleaned. That doesn't make it murder. Wolfe turned toward the bedroom door, then let us see what was cleaned there. In the bedroom. The police tape marking the original position of the body was still faintly visible on the floor. Small strips, squares, the neat little markers that make a room look like a diagram. Wolfe examined them with distaste. The body was here, Rowe said, pointing. Gun in his right hand. Wolfe's gaze went to the right side of the bed. And yet the bedside table is bare. No water, no book, no tobacco. That is possible, but it is not human. Rowe snapped. Not everybody lives like you. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Indeed, most live worse. But Daniel Hart did not live like this. Miss Hart's account is again relevant. He moved to the closet. The clothes hung inside were arranged with unnatural precision, shirts evenly spaced, trousers aligned. Wolfe ran his gaze along them and stopped. Archie, he said. I looked where he looked. Between two shirts was a gap that was too regular to be accident, like an item had been removed and the rest had been spaced to hide it. Something's missing, I said. Rowe shrugged. A jacket, shoes, a tie. People misplace things. Wolfe's voice went cool. The missing item is the one the cleaner wished to remove. Therefore, it is significant. I took out my notebook and wrote, closet gap, removed item. Wolfe turned to the dresser. Its top was bare except for a small dish holding cuff links. Silver, simple. Wolfe did not touch them. He looked at the dish's underside shadow. I leaned. A faint rectangle of lighter wood showed where something had sat and been removed recently. A box, I said. Same shape as the desk shadow. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes. Rowe frowned. What kind of box? Wolfe's voice was flat. One that someone removed from both places, or moved from one to the other. That's impossible, Rowe said. Wolfe looked at him as if Rowe had suggested orchids grow in soot. Is it a man keeps a box? Perhaps with documents, perhaps with valuables, perhaps with a weapon. He moves it, he hides it. Then someone else removes it. Rowe's face hardened. You're building a story. I am reading one, Wolfe replied. The dust supplies the punctuation, I said. Boss, what about the gun? The police have it, Rowe answered before Wolfe could. Ballistics matches. Registered to Hart. Bought legally. No sign of anyone else in the room. Wolfe's eyes drifted to the carpet. No sign, he said. Meaning you did not look for the correct sign. Rowe's jaw set. We looked. Wolfe ignored him and nodded toward the bedroom window. Archie. I went to the window. The sill was clean, wiped. But in the track where the lower window slides, there was a thin line of dust and 2 tiny scratches in it, as though something metal had been dragged lightly across. A tool, I said, or a ring. Something hard brushed it. Wolfe's voice was mild. Or the edge of the missing box. Rowe's eyes sharpened. You think the gun was fired near the window? I think, Wolfe said, that someone held something hard and rectangular there and shifted it, checking it, hiding it, or removing it. The dust recorded the motion. Dust is a travel log, Lieutenant. It does not blink. Rowe stared at the window track, then at the tape marks on the floor. That doesn't. Wolfe cut him off. If Daniel Hart shot himself, the room would show his ordinary mess and his ordinary habits. Instead, the window track shows recent contact by metal, handled close, then wiped, consistent with someone moving or checking a small hard object, like the missing box before the room was sanitized. Rowe's face reddened. That could be anything. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It could, and yet your report does not mention it. That is my point. Rowe looked as if he might explode. He didn't, because at that moment Lila Hart appeared in the doorway, pale but composed. She had let herself in with the doorman's permission. She stood watching Wolfe with a kind of fierce hope that made me uncomfortable. What does it mean? She asked. Wolfe turned toward her. It means someone rearranged the scene after your brother stopped arguing. She swallowed. So it wasn't suicide. Wolfe's expression softened only slightly, and that was more alarming than comfort. Madam, certainty requires more than dust, but the dust has provided direction. Lila Hart's hands clenched. Direction to whom? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. To the person who had reason to erase him. Rose snapped. We don't have a suspect. Wolfe turned to him. Then get one. Rowe glared. You think it has to do with the Kessler Trust? Wolfe said nothing. Silence is sometimes his loudest accusation. I filled in because somebody had to make the world move. Daniel Hart was an accountant for the Kessler Trust. If he found something and planned to reveal it, someone might decide the simplest fix was to remove him and polish the room. Rowe's mouth tightened. We checked his work laptop. Nothing obvious. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Obvious is for amateurs. The box that is missing from the desk and dresser is not obvious. It is intentional. Rowe looked at the rectangular dust shadows again. All right, he said grudgingly. Assume there was a box. What was in it? Wolfe's voice was calm. The answer is not in this apartment. It is in the trust. Rowe's eyes flicked to Lila Hart. We can't just barge into a foundation because you don't like dust. Wolfe's mouth tightened. You can. You merely require courage and a warrant. Rowe bristled. You don't get warrants from dust. Wolfe turned his gaze back to the bookshelf, the couch, the rug. You get warrants from contradictions. Dust merely points at them. Then Wolfe did something I did not expect. He walked back into the living room, stood still for another long moment, and then asked a question that sounded like it had nothing to do with death. Where is the vacuum cleaner? He said. Rowe blinked. What? The vacuum, Wolfe repeated. A man who lives here has one. If he does not, he has a service. Yet the rug is newly shaken. Rowe frowned and glanced around. Closet, maybe. I opened the hall closet. It contained coats, umbrellas, a folded step stool. No vacuum, no cleaning supplies, no broom, no dustpan, not even a pathetic little sponge, I said. He didn't keep cleaning gear. Wolfe nodded. Therefore the cleaning was done by someone who brought supplies, used them and removed them. That is not ordinary tidying. That is sanitation. Rowe's face tightened. You think the killer cleaned up? I think, Wolfe said. The killer had time. Time again, it always comes back to time. A hurried killer makes messes. A patient one makes theater. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, we will go home. I will eat. Then you will go to the Kessler Trust. Rowe snapped. You can't just... Wolfe cut him off with calm brutality. I can and I will. The trust is not a fortress, Lieutenant. It is a business of virtue. Virtue has doors. Lila Hart's eyes were bright. Will you find who did it? Wolfe regarded her. Madam, someone believed they could erase your brother and tidy the world afterward. That belief is arrogance. Arrogance is always punished if one is patient. On the way out, Rowe caught my arm in the hallway. His voice was low and sharp. Goodwin, if Wolfe is going to stir up a foundation, I need something I can put in a report. I looked at him. You'll get it. What? He demanded. I tapped my notebook. The dust has a map. Rowe stared at me like he hated that sentence and couldn't deny it. As we left the building, the city was doing what it always does. Onking, hurrying, ignoring. Daniel Hart's apartment remained behind us, perfectly clean, perfectly composed, and perfectly wrong. And somewhere, in someone's possession, there was a missing box, rectangular, portable, valuable enough to steal twice. That's the thing about tidy scenes. They're meant to end the story. Wolfe never lets them. Chapter 3. The body and the furniture, the victim, Caleb Rusk, lay too neatly beside the coffee table, like he'd been placed rather than fallen. His shirt was straight, his pockets emptied, his phone missing. A glass on the table held a perfect ring of dust, except the glass itself was freshly washed. Wolfe pictured hands moving objects with careful patience. The killer didn't just take a life, they curated the aftermath. Caleb Rusk had been Daniel Hart's supervisor at the Kessler Trust. We learned that the following afternoon, when Archie Goodwin, who is to say, I presented myself at the Trust's offices on Madison Avenue with my best expression of polite persistence and a card that opens doors faster than virtue. The Kessler Trust occupied 3 floors of a building whose lobby smelled of polished stone and well-funded benevolence. A brass plaque listed its mission in words that made humanity sound like a tidy ledger: community development, arts education, fiscal stewardship, fiscal stewardship. That phrase had the faint odor of irony. I asked for Caleb Rusk and was informed, by a receptionist whose smile could have been laminated, that Mr. Rusk had not been in since Tuesday. Has he called? I asked. No, she said. Is this about Mr. Hart? Possibly, I said. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, I was seated in a corner office with a view of the river and a man who did not look like a murderer, but did look like he had never once lost control of a room. Caleb Rusk was in his early 40s, hair trimmed, suit precise, tie understated. His desk was immaculate without being staged. If Daniel Hart's apartment had been clean like a lie, this office was clean like a habit. Mr. Goodwin, he said, I understand you are assisting the police. I assist whoever needs the truth, I said. It's a service. He gave me a faint smile. Daniel's death was tragic. Suicide, I asked. That is what we were told. Did he seem suicidal? Rusk's fingers tapped once on the desk, then stilled. Daniel was conscientious, sometimes too conscientious. He worried. About what? Numbers, he said lightly. Accountants worry about numbers. And you don't? I asked. He smiled again. Not in the same way. We went in circles for 15 minutes, polite, careful, circling the word embezzlement without letting it touch the air. He admitted Daniel had been reviewing certain internal allocations, small discrepancies, nothing serious. Routine, he said. Routine enough to remove a box from his desk. I asked. That got a flicker in his eyes. Just a flicker. I don't know what you mean, he said. I mean Daniel kept documents in a small rectangular box, I said. It's gone. Rusk leaned back slightly. If Daniel removed files from this office, that would be highly irregular. So would suicide, I said. He stood, signaling the end. Mr. Goodwin, the trust, cooperates fully with law enforcement, but we cannot entertain speculation. I left with nothing tangible and everything interesting. An hour later my phone rang. It was Lieutenant Rowe. Goodwin, he said, and this time there was no politeness. We have another body. Where? Kessler Trust. Caleb Rusk, in his office. I didn't waste breath. I told Wolfe. He closed his eyes briefly, not in grief, but in calculation. Prepare to go, he said. Caleb Rusk lay on the floor beside his coffee table. Not crumpled, not twisted, placed. The office, when we arrived, had been cleared of staff and filled with uniforms. Inspector Kramer stood near the door looking as if someone had rearranged his day without permission. You're enjoying this, he growled when he saw Wolfe. I enjoy nothing, Wolfe replied, except accuracy. Rusk's body lay on its side, one arm extended toward the edge of the low table. His shirt was straight, cuffs buttoned, tie loosened by exactly 1 inch. His face was pale but composed. Gunshot? I asked. Rowe shook his head, blunt force back of the skull, no sign of struggle. Of course not, Wolfe murmured. I crouched near the body. The pockets had been turned out. Wallet, gone. Phone gone. Robbery, I suggested. Rowe's lips tightened. Unlikely, watch still on his wrist, expensive. Wolfe did not kneel. He observed from above, his eyes tracing angles and distances. The shirt, he said. Rowe frowned. What about it? It is straight, Wolfe said. Too straight. Rusk's body had the look of a man arranged for a photograph. No twist in the fabric, no awkward bunching beneath the shoulder. A man struck from behind, Wolfe said. Falls without composure. Kramer snorted. Unless he's lucky, Wolfe ignored him. He moved to the coffee table. On it stood a single glass. It held a faint ring of dust on the wood beneath it, a perfect circle, like a pale halo. But the glass itself was clear to the point of exhibition. Archie, Wolfe said. I lifted the glass carefully with a handkerchief. It was spotless. No smudges. No lip marks recently washed. Rowe stared. We didn't touch that. Precisely, Wolfe said. He looked at the dust ring on the table. Observe, the glass stood here long enough to gather a faint outline in the dust. Then it was lifted, washed, and replaced in precisely the same location. Rowe's jaw tightened. You're sure? Look, Wolfe said. The ring was imperfect at one small segment, as though the glass had been set down slightly misaligned, then adjusted. A careful adjustment, Wolfe said softly. A hand that takes time. Kramer shifted his weight. You're saying the killer washed the glass and put it back? Yes, Wolfe said, and likely removed another. Rowe scanned the table. There's only one. Exactly, Wolfe said. He walked slowly around the body, measuring with his eyes the distance from desk to table, table to door. The furniture, he said. What about it? Kramer demanded. The angle of the coffee table relative to the rug, Wolfe replied. It is parallel to the desk, yet the indentations in the rug beneath suggest it once stood at a slight diagonal. I crouched and looked. There were faint impressions in the rug pile, older marks, misaligned with the table's current position. Summonen straightened it, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Kramer swore softly. So what? He liked things neat. Wolfe turned toward him. Daniel Hart's apartment was clean to conceal. Caleb Rusk's office is arranged to deceive. Rowe's eyes sharpened. You think the same person? I think, Wolfe said, that someone did not merely take a life. He curated the aftermath. He stepped closer to the body, careful not to disturb it. Mr. Rusk's phone is missing, Wolfe said. His pockets emptied, yet his watch remains. The purpose was not theft. It was removal of information. Rowe nodded slowly. His email, his messages. And Daniel Hart's box, I added. Wolfe inclined his head. Yes. Kramer folded his arms. All right, you've got 2 dead men and a foundation. Where does that leave us? Wolfe's eyes moved once more around the office. The glass, the rug, the body lying too neatly beside the table. It leaves us, he said quietly, with a man who believes that order is protection. Rowe frowned. Meaning, Wolfe said, that he thinks if the scene is tidy, the motive disappears. Kramer's voice was rough. You've got a name. Wolfe looked at the door, where a framed mission statement hung straight as a soldier. Not yet, he said, but we have the outline of his mind. He turned to me. Archie, return to the trust tomorrow, obtain a list of senior trustees, identify who had access to Daniel Hart's review files and to Caleb Rusk's communications. Rowe said sharply, You think this is internal. Wolfe's voice was calm. I think it is curated. He gestured toward the body. Caleb Rusk was not left in anger. He was left in symmetry. As the medical examiner's team entered, careful and professional, I glanced once more at the glass and its perfect ring of dust. The killer had washed away fingerprints, but preserved alignment. That's the trouble with meticulous people. They think if they straighten the furniture, no one will notice the blood. Chapter 4. The wrong kind of dust in the hallway closet. Wolfe found the odd detail. Construction dust, fine and pale, tucked into the door track. But the building hadn't had repairs in months, and Caleb didn't strike Wolfe as a man who remodeled for fun. That dust belonged to a different world. Maintenance shafts, boiler rooms, utility corridors. It wasn't everywhere, just where a door slid and hid evidence. Somebody brought that dust in on their shoes, then tried to sweep their story clean. The police had done what they always do in a respectable office. They photographed, they bagged, they measured, and they declared the scene contained. Wolfe does not believe in containment. He believes in leakage. After the body had been removed, and Kramer had made a noise like a kettle about to boil, Wolfe asked to see the hallway closet. "There's nothing there," Rowe said. "Coats, cleaning supplies." "Then we will enjoy the coats," Wolfe replied. The closet door was a sliding panel built into the wall, smooth, modern, designed to vanish. I pulled it open. Inside were 2 spare jackets on hangers, an umbrella stand, a small metal cabinet with extra paper supplies, and a shelf above with a folded blanket and a box of printer toner. Orderly, predictable. Wolfe stood just outside and looked down. "Archie," he said. I followed his gaze to the lower door track. In the narrow channel where the sliding panel ran, there was a faint accumulation of pale powder. Not grey city dust, not the darker grit of street traffic, but something lighter, finer. I crouched and touched it with the tip of my pencil. It clung, almost silky. "Plaster," I said. "Or drywall," Rowe frowned. "This building hasn't had work done." "Not in this office." I agreed. Wolfe nodded once. "Precisely." He bent slightly, not enough to strain dignity, and examined the track more closely. "The dust is recent," he said. "It has not settled evenly. It has been disturbed and then partially cleared." Rowe crossed his arms. "So someone with dirty shoes stepped in the closet." "Not stepped," Wolfe corrected. "Slid." He pointed. The powder was concentrated toward the back of the track, as if the door had been closed over it more than once. "Observe the pattern," Wolfe said. The dust was deposited while the door was open. Then the door was closed, dragging the dust into the channel. Later, someone attempted to wipe the visible surfaces, but not the track. Rowe's eyes sharpened, meaning someone hid something in there. Wolfe opened the small metal cabinet. Inside were reams of paper and toner cartridges. Nothing unusual. "Not inside the cabinet," Wolfe said. "Behind." He gestured for me to move the hanging jackets aside. I did. The wall behind them looked ordinary until I noticed a faint scuff mark near the baseboard. I pressed gently. The panel shifted. Rowe swore softly. "Hidden access." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "A service hatch." We slid the inner panel open. Behind it was a narrow maintenance void, wiring, pipes, and a small space just large enough to conceal a package. "Empty now." "Recently used," Wolfe said. "How can you tell?" Rowe demanded. Wolfe pointed to the lower lip of the opening. The same pale dust coated it, disturbed in a rectangular patch the size of a small box. I felt a familiar chill. Daniel Hart's box. "Or Caleb Rusk's phone," Wolfe said. "Or both." Rowe straightened. "So someone hid something here, but why the construction dust?" Wolfe stepped back and looked at the pale residue again. "This is not office dust. It is mechanical dust." He rubbed a trace between his fingers and sniffed faintly. "Utility corridors," he said. "Boiler rooms, maintenance shafts, places where walls are opened and closed." Rowe's gaze shifted toward the door. "The building engineer. Or anyone who has access to the building's hidden routes," Wolfe said. He stepped into the hallway outside Rusk's office and looked down the corridor toward the elevators. The carpet was pristine, the walls newly painted. "Caleb Rusk did not remodel for pleasure," Wolfe said. "He was a man of presentation, not construction." Rowe nodded slowly. "So someone came from the building's underbelly." "And brought its dust with him," Wolfe said, then attempted to sweep his story clean. We returned to the office. Wolfe stood in the center once more, turning slightly, as he had in Daniel Hart's apartment. "Daniel Hart's apartment was sanitized after the fact," he said. "Caleb Rusk's office was arranged after the act." Rowe frowned. "You think the killer moved through both spaces?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and in both cases he had time." Kramer, who had been silent for a rare and admirable stretch, finally spoke. "All right. Let's assume this joker crawled through ducts like a raccoon. That still doesn't tell me why." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "It tells you he has access without scrutiny." "To what?" Kramer demanded. "To everywhere," Wolfe replied. He looked again at the hidden panel. Archie, he said, who maintains this building? I made a note to find out. The trust leased the floors, but the building management would have engineers, custodians, contractors, men who moved through spaces no one else noticed. Rose's voice was thoughtful now, less combative. If someone used the service void to hide evidence, they'd need a key, or a code, or routine access. Wolfe said. Kramer grunted. Maintenance. Wolfe inclined his head. Perhaps. He turned to me. Archie, obtain a list of building maintenance staff. Also inquire whether any renovations have occurred recently in adjacent floors. Rose said, we can do that. Wolfe gave him a look that suggested confidence in that claim would be rewarded if justified. As we left the office, I glanced once more at the sliding closet door. The visible surfaces gleamed, the track hid the truth. Outside, in the bright corridor, with its respectable carpet and framed certificates, nothing looked disturbed. But somewhere in the building's unseen passages, where pipes ran and wires hummed, there had been movement, and movement leaves dust. Wolfe stepped into the elevator, with the air of a man who has just been insulted by a poorly executed lie. The wrong kind of dust, he murmured. Meaning? I asked. Meaning, Wolfe said, that our killer lives between rooms. The elevator doors slid shut with a quiet efficiency, and I found myself wondering how many doors in that building led somewhere no one admitted existed. Chapter 5. Keys make quiet criminals. The lock had no damage, no pry marks, no forced entry drama. That narrowed the list to folks who could enter like they belonged. The landlord, building staff, and anyone Caleb trusted with a spare. Wolfe met Darla Venn, the landlord, who smiled like rent was her religion. He met Jace Holton, the maintenance man, who smelled like metal and excuses. And he met Nina Cade, Caleb's friend, who apologized too fast for a grief she hadn't earned yet. If you want to understand a building, don't ask the tenants, ask the person who collects the checks. Darla Venn owned the Madison property that housed the Kessler Trust. She received us in a corner office 2 floors below Rusk's, surrounded by framed photographs of ribbon cuttings and tasteful charity dinners. She was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed, with the serene smile of a woman who believes gravity applies to everyone but her. Such a tragedy, she said, folding her hands on the desk. First Mr. Hart, now Mr. Rusk. We strive to provide a secure environment. Wolfe inclined his head. Security interests me. Her smile brightened slightly. We have cameras in the lobby and elevators. Access, controlled floors, keyed offices. No forced entry to Mr. Rusk's office, Wolfe said. None reported, she replied smoothly. Wolfe watched her for a long moment. Who holds master access? Her eyes did
Nero
not
Wolfe
flicker.
and the umbilical
Building
cord of
management and
wristwatch.
maintenance.
A jeweler shows
Naturally.
Sophie a watch that only
Names,
runs when someone
Wolfe
touches it.
said.
Open the bag.
She
There's a
supplied them without
beautiful
visible
white
hesitation.
clock. The watch is tied
Jace
to a
Holton,
person.
senior
It has
maintenance,
jewels
2
that
assistants who
she
rotated
just stole.
shifts, and herself.
Hope you like it.
You
Come back
retain a
next
master
and I will
key?
drop part
Wolfe
2.
asked. Of course, she said lightly. It would be irresponsible not to. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. She leaned forward slightly. Are you implying? I imply nothing, Wolfe said. I inquire. Her smile tightened a fraction. From there we descended into the building's mechanical heart. Jace Holton was in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, sleeves rolled, hands marked by honest work and less honest patience. He smelled faintly of oil and heated metal. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm and defensive. You're the detective, he said to Wolfe. I am the man who listens, Wolfe replied. Holton shrugged. I fix things. I don't break them. Wolfe regarded him as one might regard a tool, useful, potentially dangerous. You have access to the service corridors, Wolfe said. Yeah, Holton answered. That's my job. And to the void behind Mr. Rusk's closet, Wolfe added. Holton blinked. The maintenance hatch. Yes, he scratched his jaw. We run cables through there. It's nothing. Was it nothing 2 nights ago? Wolfe asked. Holton's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't keep a diary of every crawl space. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. Perhaps you should. Holton shifted his weight. Look, I clock out at 6. Check the logs. We will, Wolfe said. Holton's jaw tightened. You think I hid something? I think, Wolfe said, that dust does not travel alone. Holton frowned. Dust. Wolfe did not elaborate. Silence is Wolfe's way of letting a man consider whether to speak further. Holton did not. Back upstairs, we encountered Nina Cade. She arrived at Rusk's office unannounced, while police were still collecting what they could from a curated scene. Late 20s, dark hair loose around her shoulders, eyes red, rimmed but dry. She wore grief like a coat she had put on carefully. I just heard, she said breathlessly. Caleb, oh my God! She pressed a hand to her mouth, then lowered it, looking from Kramer to Wolfe to me. You're with the police? She asked. Adjacent, I said. She nodded too quickly. Caleb was my friend. We had dinner Tuesday. He was fine, tired, maybe, but fine. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. You saw him the night he died? Yes, she said. We ate at a place on 3rd. He walked me to my car. That was it. What time? Wolfe asked. About 9, she said without pause. Rowe, who had been listening, checked his notes. Time of death estimated between 10 and midnight. Nina's hands tightened in her coat sleeves. I went home. Alone? Wolfe asked. Her eyes flickered. Yes. She recovered quickly. I mean, yes, of course. Wolfe did not smile. He rarely does when someone recovers too smoothly. Did Mr. Rusk give you a key to his office? Wolfe asked. No, she said, almost before he finished. Why would he? We trust, Wolfe said. She laughed softly, a little brittle. We weren't like that. Like what? I asked. Her eyes flashed irritation. Like that. Wolfe watched her the way he watches a chessboard, looking not at the piece that moved, but at the one that hesitated. You are not yet grieving, he said quietly. She stiffened. Excuse me, grief is untidy, Wolfe said. You are composed. Color rose in her cheeks. People handle things differently, indeed, Wolfe agreed. Kramer cleared his throat. Miss Cade, we may need you to come downtown. She nodded too readily. Of course, anything. As she turned to leave, Wolfe said one more thing. Miss Cade, did Mr. Rusk ever mention Daniel Hart? Her shoulders paused, just a fraction, before she resumed moving. Once, she said over her shoulder. He said Daniel worried too much. Then she was gone, in the hallway. I looked at Wolfe. Thoughts? I asked. He adjusted his cuff. The lock was not forced, he said. Therefore the door was opened by someone who possessed permission, formal or intimate. Landlord, maintenance, or trusted friend, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. And I pressed. He glanced toward the elevator where Nina had disappeared. Keys make quiet criminals, he said. And loud ones, I asked. Loud ones, Wolfe said. Break windows. Our killer prefers doors. We stepped back into the elevator, descending once more into the building's layered machinery. Somewhere in that structure, behind polished doors and beneath respectable carpets, someone had moved freely, and whoever holds the keys rarely makes noise. Chapter 6, Obsession, leaves patterns. Wolfe studied the cleaning style, like handwriting, surfaces wiped in straight lines, corners detailed, nothing randomly ignored. That wasn't panic cleaning. That was habit, the kind that calms a mind by controlling a room. Darla's office reeked of lemon cleaner, and her keys were lined up like soldiers. Nina's purse held disinfectant wipes, and a tiny lint roller like a comfort blanket. Jace's toolbox held oil and grit. No room for neatness, no love for polish. There are two kinds of neat. The kind you do because guests are coming, and the kind you do because your mind can't rest until the world lines up. Wolfe, who keeps orchids by schedule and meals by ritual, knows the difference. He does not admire it in others. He recognizes it the way a locksmith recognizes a pick. We were back in the brownstone that evening, the city outside making its usual racket, Wolfe inside making his own quieter, one thinking. Fritz had served dinner with the controlled pride of a man rescuing civilization from crime, and Wolfe had eaten with the concentration he usually reserves for humiliation. Afterward, he sat in the office with his eyes half-lidded, as if the day's dust and death were still floating in the air. Or professionalism, I offered. A hired cleaner. Wolfe's eyes opened slightly. A hired cleaner does not wipe in straight lines and then neglect the door track. A hired cleaner removes the obvious. A compulsive cleaner removes what disturbs him and misses what does not. The killer is disturbed. Wolfe ignored me. We have 3 candidates for keys and access. Venn, Holton, Cade, their habits will speak. You want me to rummage through their habits, I said. I want you to observe, Wolfe replied. Rummaging is crude. That, coming from a man who pays me to open drawers, was rich. Still, I understood what he meant. I called Kramer and informed him, politely, that Wolfe intended to speak again with Darla Venn and Nina Cade the next morning. Kramer grunted something in agreement that sounded like indigestion. Darla Venn welcomed us with the same polished warmth as before, but this time I noticed what Wolfe had probably smelled the moment we stepped inside. Lemon cleaner. Not faintly. Not in the air as an afterthought. It was embedded. The way perfume gets embedded in drapes. Her office was scrubbed so thoroughly, it looked glossy. Even the edge of her desk, the part no one sees unless they're nosy, had been wiped clean. And her keys. They sat on a felt pad near the telephone, lined in a row like soldiers, brass master elevator, override, office key, something that looked like a security cabinet key. Each faced the same direction, teeth aligned. I could almost hear them standing at attention. Wolfe did not look directly at them. He didn't need to. His eyes took them in the way a bird takes in movement. Mrs. Venn, Wolfe said, you are a fastidious woman. Her smile sharpened. I believe in order. Order, Wolfe murmured, is not the same as cleanliness. She stiffened slightly. Is there a difference? Yes, Wolfe said. Cleanliness is physical. Order is psychological. Her smile held, but her eyes cooled. Are you here to insult me, Mr. Wolfe? No, Wolfe said. I am here to measure you. Venn's posture tightened, as though she'd been told her weight was being recorded. Wolfe asked polite questions, about the building's maintenance schedule, about tenant access, about her security arrangements. She answered smoothly, like a woman reciting a contract. Then Wolfe asked casually, do you keep cleaning supplies here? She blinked. Of course, in the supply closet down the hall. And do you clean yourself? Wolfe asked. Her smile returned slightly. I prefer professionals. Wolfe nodded. Yet the lemon cleaner is pervasive. Professionals do not perfume their work. Venn's fingers tapped once on her desk and stopped. I like the scent, she said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. So you apply it. I touch up, she admitted. I don't like smudges. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. Do you dislike fingerprints? Her gaze sharpened. Every own dislikes fingerprints. No, Wolfe corrected. Only those who fear being identified by them. That was the first moment her composure truly wavered. A flicker, tinny, controlled, but real. Wolfe let it pass. He rose. Thank you, Mrs. Venn. As we left, I glanced back at the keys aligned like a little brass army compulsion. All right, Nina Cade. Agreed to meet us in a coffee shop, 3 blocks from the trust. It was the kind of place with soft chairs and hard prices, where people go to be seen working. Nina arrived 5 minutes early and apologized as if that was a moral flaw. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't sleep. Grief, I said. She nodded quickly. Yes. She sat with her purse on her lap, both hands on it like it might bolt. Wolfe watched that purse with interest so cold, it might have been pity. Miss Cade, he said, you were close to Mr. Rusk. We were friends, she said. Too fast again. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. And you are meticulous. She blinked. What, you have wiped this table, Wolfe said calmly. I looked. There was a faint dampness along the edge where her hand had passed, and the napkin she'd used sat folded perfectly beside her cup. Nina flushed. It was sticky. It was not, Wolfe said. She pressed her lips together. I don't like grime. Wolfe inclined his head. Show me your purse. Her eyes widened. Why? Because, Wolfe said. Your purse is your private space. People decorate it with necessity. Her hands tightened around the strap. That's personal. Wolfe's voice did not change. So is murder. That did it. Nina's face went pale. Slowly, reluctantly, she opened the purse and tilted it toward Wolfe. Inside were the normal objects: wallet, phone, keys, lipstick, and then, like little comforts of control, disinfectant wipes, a travel-size lemon sanitizer, and a tiny lint roller, a comfort blanket. I murmured before I could stop myself. Nina snapped the purse shut. Lots of people carry wipes. Not as an identity, Wolfe said. You do. Her eyes flashed anger. What are you saying? Wolfe's tone was calm. I am saying that the person who sanitized Daniel Hart's apartment and curated Caleb Rusk's office cleaned in the manner of a compulsive, not a hired professional. Straight lines, deliberate corners, selective neglect. Nina stared at him, breathing shallowly. So you think I killed them because I carry wipes? No, Wolfe said. I think you carry wipes because you fear disorder. The killer feared disorder. That didn't comfort her. It frightened her because it meant Wolfe understood her. And, Wolfe added, you apologized too quickly when you heard of Mr. Rusk's death. That suggests foreknowledge or rehearsal. Nina's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the coffee shop as if searching for a door that wasn't there. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Tell me, Miss Cade, have you ever been in the building service corridors? Her eyes flicked. Just once, down and left. A small movement, a tell. I don't know what you mean, she said. Wolfe nodded. Yes, you do. On the way out. I asked the obvious. Boss, what about Jace Holton? He has access, and he works where the pale dust lives. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Holton's world is grit and oil. He is not fastidious. His toolbox would have to contain a conscience for him to sanitize an apartment. You saw his toolbox? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said flatly. Oil, grit, metal filings. No disinfectant. No lemon, no polish. No love for control. We rode back to the brownstone in silence. Wolfe was thinking. I was thinking too, but with more traffic noise. Finally, I said, so our neatness points at Venn or Cade. Or at someone who resembles them. Wolfe corrected. That's ominous, I said. It is accurate, Wolfe replied. At home, Wolfe went to his office, sat, and stared at nothing. I sat at my desk and tried to look useful. After a long time, Wolfe spoke again. Archie, he said, obsession leaves. Patton's the killer did not merely remove evidence. He restored a world that is intimate. I frowned. Intimate with the victim, with the building, with the trust. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. With order. I scribbled the word down even though it was already stuck in my head. Order. And somewhere behind that order, hiding in a door track with the wrong kind of dust, was the box that had been removed. The phone that had been stolen, and the truth that somebody had tried to wipe away in straight lines. Chapter 7. The rearranged life. Wolfe measured the furniture spacing and found the scam. The couch had been moved an inch to hide a scuff on the floor. Under the couch, a clean rectangle showed where it used to sit. Dustless wood surrounded by dusty boards. The coffee table legs had fresh, felt pads, new as a fresh alibi. Somebody didn't want drag marks to show where Caleb really fell. A killer who relocates furniture is a killer who thinks the room can be convinced. If there is one thing Nero Wolfe despises more than incompetence, it is theatrics performed badly. Caleb Rusk's office was theatrical. We returned the morning after Nina Cade's meeting in the coffee shop. Inspector Kramer had secured the scene again at Wolfe's insistence, which meant he was already in a temper. He stood by the door with the expression of a man who has been told to reopen a wound because someone else wants to examine the stitching. "You've had your look," he said as we entered. "Make it quick." Wolfe ignored the tone and went directly to the rug. "Archie," he said. I knew what he wanted. I knelt and examined the edge of the Persian rug beneath the coffee table. The pile was soft, the pattern intricate, but the compression marks in the fibers told a different story. There were faint, older impressions at a slight angle to the table's present alignment. "See," I said quietly. Kramer scowled. "I see a rug. You see the current position," I said. "Look at the nap." He crouched reluctantly. Wolfe remained standing, immense and still. "The fibers here," I continued, pointing, "are crushed in a diagonal line that doesn't match the table legs now." Kramer grunted. "So it was moved." "Not was," Wolfe corrected. "Is." He took one careful step forward and, without touching anything, studied the couch against the wall. "Measure," he said. I stood and paced the distance from couch arm to wall molding, then from the opposite arm to the edge of the bookshelf. 43 inches here," I said. 42.5 there. Kramer rolled his eyes. "Half an inch." Wolfe turned his head slowly. "Half an inch is the difference between care and correction." He directed me to kneel at the front edge of the couch. I bent and peered beneath. There it was. A clean rectangle in the dust on the wood floor, sharp-edged, unmistakable, surrounded by a faint grey haze that had settled over months. The couch had not always stood where it stood now. "Dustless wood," I murmured. "Yes," Wolfe said, "and dusted wood elsewhere." Kramer swore softly. "You're saying the couch was moved after the dust settled?" "Precisely," Wolfe replied. "And recently." I extended my hand under the frame, careful not to disturb anything. The boards beyond the clean rectangle held a thin film of ordinary office dust. The rectangle itself was almost glossy. "Something was here before," I said. "The couch," Wolfe said. 1 inch forward. Kramer straightened. "Why move it an inch?" Wolfe's gaze dropped to the floor just beyond the clean rectangle, to hide what the inch concealed. I shifted position and angled my view across the floorboards. There, faint but visible when you knew to look, was a scuff, an irregular abrasion in the varnish. "Drag mark," I said. "Not large," Wolfe said. "Not dramatic, but present." Kramer stared at the scuff, then at the couch. "You think the body was dragged?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that Caleb Rusk did not fall where he lies." The words settled into the room with weight. Rowe, who had been silent and watchful, stepped closer. "If he was struck near the desk and then moved." Then the killer required clearance. Wolfe finished. I rose and walked to the coffee table. "The table legs," I said. Wolfe nodded. Each leg bore a small felt pad. Beige, circular, clean. Too clean. I crouched and touched one gently. It was soft and recently applied, the adhesive edge still slightly visible. "These are new," I said. Kramer's brows knit. "Furniture stores sell those everywhere." "Yes," Wolfe agreed, "and they are applied to prevent scratching when furniture is moved." Kramer blinked. Wolfe continued calmly. "The table was dragged. The legs marked the floor." The killer noticed. He applied new felt pads to disguise further movement and to prevent additional evidence. Rowe looked from the scuff to the pads to the couch. "So the order was wrong," he said slowly. "He moved the body, then the table, then the couch, then corrected the scuffs and aligned the furniture," I added. "To look intentional." Wolfe inclined his head. "Yes." Kramer's voice was rough. "That's a lot of work." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "which indicates time and privacy." He turned slowly in the center of the office. "Consider," he said. "Caleb Rusk is struck. He falls, not neatly beside the coffee table, but near his desk, perhaps turning. His body is then dragged to a position beside the table to simulate a fall. The table is nudged, the legs scrape, a scuff appears. The couch obstructs, or reveals more than intended. The killer shifts it an inch to conceal the scuff. Rowe ran a hand through his hair, and the dust shows it. Dust, Wolfe said, is impartial. Kramer glared at the couch as if it had personally offended him. Why bother? He demanded. Why not leave him where he fell? Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Because the killer had a story. A story, Kramer repeated. Yes, Wolfe said. Rusk was to appear relaxed, perhaps meeting someone, perhaps drinking, a spontaneous altercation, not premeditated murder. I glanced at the single glass on the table. The washed glass. Exactly, Wolfe said. He moved to the desk and examined the chair. Its wheels left faint impressions in the rug, consistent with recent movement. Archie, he said. The spacing. I measured the distance between desk and table. 36 inches, I said. Wolfe nodded. Enough to pass comfortably, but if the body had fallen between them, the spacing would differ. Kramer's impatience resurfaced. You're reconstructing ballet steps. I am reconstructing a lie, Wolfe corrected. He stepped back and regarded the entire office again. A killer who relocates furniture, he said quietly, is a killer who believes the room can be convinced. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Rowe broke it. So who has the temperament for that? Wolfe did not answer immediately. He walked once more to the couch and examined the back seam. Archie, he said. I leaned close. On the back of the couch, nearly invisible, was a faint smear of something darker than the fabric. Blood, I whispered. Possibly, Wolfe said, transferred when the body was moved. Kramer snapped his fingers toward one of the techs in the hall. Swab that. The technician entered, careful and efficient. Rowe looked at Wolfe. This lines up with Daniel Hart's apartment. Yes, Wolfe said. Both scenes altered, both curated, and both connected to the trust, Rowe said. Yes. Kramer folded his arms. We've got landlord with keys, maintenance with access, and friend with opportunity. And now we've got furniture. Wolfe's mouth tightened faintly. We have something more. What? Kramer demanded. We have patience, Wolfe said. Kramer made a disgusted sound. Wolfe ignored it. Archie, he said, recall the dust in the closet track. Construction dust. I said. Yes, Wolfe said. The wrong kind. He gestured toward the scuff again. Where would one acquire such dust? Service corridors, Rowe said. Mechanical floors. Or Wolfe added. Recent renovations. Rowe frowned. The building hasn't had work done. Not publicly, Wolfe said. Kramer looked skeptical. You think someone renovated a floor in secret? I think someone with control of the building could create access without scrutiny, Wolfe said. My mind clicked. Darlaven, I said. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, approving but cautious. Perhaps, Kramer snorted. She's not lugging couches. No, Wolfe said calmly, but she might instruct someone who would. The technician straightened from swabbing the couch seam. There's a stain, he confirmed. We'll test it. Kramer nodded. Wolfe remained still. Archie, he said quietly, what is missing? Besides the phone, I asked. Yes, the box from Daniel Hart's desk, I said. And Wolfe prompted. And whatever Rusk had on his own devices, I added. Wolfe inclined his head. The rearranged furniture suggests urgency and concealment. The hidden service hatch suggests planned storage. The washed glass suggests controlled interaction. Rowe's voice sharpened. You think Rusk met his killer willingly? Yes, Wolfe said. And then Rowe pressed. Then the killer's narrative required adjustment. Kramer looked at the couch again. This inch, he muttered. Wolfe's gaze hardened. Inch by inch, he said, is how a lie is constructed. We left the office under fluorescent lights that suddenly seemed less flattering. In the elevator, Rowe leaned against the wall. If Ven did this, he said, she had motive control over the trust's finances, exposure risk. Cade had access. Friendship. Proximity. Holton had the corridors. Wolfe nodded once. 3 roles,
Nero,
but one
Wolfe, and
mind.
the umbilical
And you
cord
think the
of
mind
his
belongs
wife.
to?
A jeweler
Rowe
shows
asked.
Wolfie a watch that
Wolfe's
only
eyes
burns when
closed
someone
briefly.
touches it.
To the one who
Open
cannot
the back.
tolerate
There was
disorder.
a
The
huge
elevator
wire
doors
neck.
opened in the
The
lobby.
watch is tied to a post.
Darla Venn
Can I
stood
feel the
speaking to a
hilt?
pair of
Let's lay
trustees,
out just
her
for it.
smile immaculate.
Hope you like it.
Across the
Open it
room,
next.
Nina
Move it to the
Cade sat on
bathroom.
a bench, twisting a napkin in her hands into a tight spiral. Jace Holton walked past us carrying a toolbox, leaving faint traces of oil in the air. Wolfe watched them all without moving. A rearranged life, he murmured. Meaning? I asked. Meaning, Wolfe said, that someone believed they could shift a man's final position as easily as a couch. We stepped out into the street. The city was loud, impatient, careless, but in a polished office upstairs, an inch of movement had betrayed a murderer. And Nero Wolfe, who trusts dust more than declarations, had begun to close the space between scuff and suspect. Chapter 8. The door track confession. Expanded. Wolfe returned to the closet door track. The pale dust was packed into the groove, like someone tried to hide something small. He lifted the track cover and found a snapped keycap from a phone case and a tiny shard of tempered glass. Tempered glass doesn't break quietly unless you help it. Like smashing a phone screen in a hurry. Wolfe checked the kitchen trash. Empty, too empty, cleaned out like the scene. The missing phone wasn't stolen for value. It was stolen for memory. There are rooms that resist examination, not because they are complex, but because they pretend to be finished. Caleb Rusk's office had that air. It presented itself as complete, arranged, aligned, dignified in tragedy. But Wolfe distrusts dignity when it arrives too promptly. We returned late in the afternoon, when the building had quieted and the hallways carried that muffled hush common to places that prefer reputation over noise. Inspector Kramer met us at the elevator, jaw set, hat brim low. "If this track doesn't sing," he muttered, "I'm charging you rent." "It has already sung," Wolfe said mildly. "You simply lack the ear," Kramer snorted. But he led us in. The office lights were harsh. The rug lay obedient. The couch maintained its carefully corrected inch. The single glass on the coffee table had been bagged and removed, leaving behind only its pale dust halo. Wolfe did not pause to admire the symmetry. He moved directly to the hallway closet, as though greeting a conspirator. "Again," he said. I knelt. The pale dust in the sliding track seemed denser now that I knew it mattered. It was not ordinary office residue. It had a chalky fineness, almost flour-like, clinging in small drifts along the groove. "Probe," Wolfe said. Rowe handed me a narrow evidence tool. I slid it gently under the aluminum track lip and lifted. The strip resisted for a breath, then came free with a metallic whisper that sounded, to me, like embarrassment beneath the cover. The dust thickened and embedded in it, like insects in amber, where fragments. The first was black plastic, slightly curved, with a tiny raised ridge. "Volume button cap," I said quietly. "From a phone case." Rowe leaned in. "You're sure?" I turned it under the light. The molded indentation was unmistakable. "Yes." Wolfe's eyes did not leave the groove. "Continue." Further down the channel, half buried, a sliver caught the fluorescent glare. I eased it free with tweezers. A shard of tempered glass, thin, curved, one edge slightly blunted by impact. The fracture pattern radiated faintly from a corner point, like a spider web arrested mid-formation. Kramer swore softly. "That's not from a window." "No," Wolfe agreed. "From a device. Tempered glass is designed to crumble into small, relatively harmless fragments when fully shattered. This piece suggested a partial break, a corner impact, not a total destruction." "Not an accidental drop," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "A deliberate strike." Rowe straightened slowly. He smashed the phone. Wolfe nodded once, and in haste. Kramer's brows drew together. Why smash it here? Why not take it and do it elsewhere? "Because time was limited," Wolfe said, "or because the killer wished to ensure immediate silence before movement." I considered the office layout, if Rusk reached for his phone during the argument. Or if the killer saw a message, Wolfe added. We all glanced instinctively at the desk. Wolfe moved there now, his bulk surprisingly graceful. He examined the front edge, running a fingertip just above the surface without touching. "There," he said. At the near right corner was a faint nick in the varnish. Not large enough to draw attention, but sharp enough to register once noticed. I held the shard against the edge. The curvature matched. Rowe inhaled slowly. He hit it on the desk. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Wrapped in fabric, perhaps, to dull the sound." My eyes went to the couch again. The faint smear along its back seam seemed suddenly more articulate. "If he pressed the phone into the upholstery and struck downward," I said, "the cushion would absorb noise." "Reasonable," Wolfe replied. Kramer rubbed his chin. "So he smashes it, pieces scatter, he scoops them up, and hides them," Wolfe said. "In the maintenance void." Rowe finished. We stood in silence for a moment, each reconstructing the invisible choreography. Rusk alive. Conversation tense. Perhaps seated. Perhaps standing. A revelation, a threat. A blow, the phone falls or is seized. The screen lights, a name appears, a message half. Read, impact silence. Wolfe turned back to the closet. "Notice," he said, "how the dust is packed toward the rear of the groove." I leaned closer. He was right. The pale powder thickened where the sliding panel would close fully. "The door was drawn shut over debris," Wolfe continued, compressing it. Rowe frowned. "Meaning the hiding occurred before the door was closed." "Yes, and later," Wolfe added. "The visible surfaces were wiped, but the groove was ignored." Wolfe's mouth tightened faintly. Arrogance rarely accounts for crevices. We replaced the cover temporarily and moved toward the small break room down the corridor. "The trash," Wolfe said again. The bin under the counter remained conspicuously empty. Too clean, the liner fresh. "When was this replaced?" Wolfe asked Rowe. "After the scene was secured," Rowe said. "Building janitorial." "Under whose instruction?" Wolfe pressed. Rowe hesitated. "Building management handles that." "Mrs. Venn," Wolfe said quietly. Kramer exhaled through his nose. "You're circling her." "I am circling control," Wolfe corrected. He opened cabinets, wiped surfaces. The sink basin shone with the same faint lemon scent we had noted in Darla Venn's office. "She touches up," I said. "Yes," Wolfe murmured. We returned to Rusk's office and stood again before the rearranged life. "Describe the full sequence," Wolfe said to me. I obliged. "Rusk works late. He meets someone voluntarily. They drink at least one glass. There may have been two, one removed." "Continue," Wolfe said. "They argue," Rusk threatens disclosure, "about the trust's finances, about Daniel Hart's findings." Wolfe inclined his head. "The killer strikes him from behind or during a turn. Rusk falls near the desk." Rowe nodded. "The killer checks the phone, sees messages, maybe from Hart or from a trustee. Panic smashes the phone to prevent immediate retrieval, breaks the case, glass fragments. And then," Wolfe prompted, "he hides the larger pieces in the maintenance void behind the closet. The track catches smaller fragments." "Why the void?" Kramer asked. "Because it is temporary concealment," Wolfe said. "He intends to retrieve them later, or has already done so." Rowe frowned. "But if he retrieved them, why leave shards?" "Because haste breeds oversight," Wolfe replied. I continued. "He drags the body to the coffee table to simulate a fall during conversation. The table scrapes, scuffing the floor. He applies fresh, felt pads to prevent further marks. He shifts the couch an inch to conceal the scuff. He wipes surfaces in straight lines. He washes the glass and replaces it exactly. He empties the trash to remove any remaining fragments or cloth." Kramer shook his head. "That's not panic. That's obsession." "Yes," Wolfe said quietly. "Obsession leaves patterns." Rowe looked thoughtful. "And both scenes, Hart's apartment and Rusk's office, show the same pattern." "Yes," Kramer crossed his arms. "So our killer is neat, controlled access to building corridors, financial motive. And comfortable in both personal and professional spaces," Wolfe added. We stood in silence, absorbing the implication. Finally, Kramer said, let's say it's Ven. She controls the building. She authorizes cleaning. She has keys. She benefits if the trust stays solvent and scandal-free, Rowe countered. But Hart worked for the trust, not the building. True, Wolfe said. Yet the building houses the trust. Financial entanglements are not rare. And Cade? I asked. Wolfe's eyes shifted slightly. Miss Cade is intimate with Rusk, he said. She carries order as armor. She arrives at the scene swiftly. She apologizes prematurely. Rowe added, but does she benefit financially? Perhaps indirectly, Wolfe said, if she is connected to the trust's leadership. Kramer's voice hardened. We need motive, not personality. You have motive, Wolfe said. Financial exposure. And evidence, Kramer pressed. Wolfe gestured toward the closet. You are holding it. We left the office once more, this time with the shard bagged and the keycap sealed. In the elevator, Rowe leaned against the wall. If the phone held messages from Hart, he said slowly. Then Rusk knew about the box. Yes, Wolfe replied. And if the box is missing, Rowe continued, then someone has those documents. Yes, and if that someone is also rearranging rooms, then he believes rooms can be convinced. Wolfe finished. Back at the brownstone, Fritz observed our expressions and wisely retreated without commentary. Wolfe settled into his chair, the day's dust metaphorically clinging to him. The killer removed the phone not for its price, he said, but for its contents. Memory, I said. Yes. He steepled his fingers. Consider the arrogance, he continued. He believes that by destroying a device, he destroys what it contains. Cloud backups, I offered. Wolfe's lips twitched faintly. Indeed. I leaned back. So the question becomes, I said, who feared what was on that phone? Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Not the man who lives in Greece, he said, but the one who lives in alignment. Outside, a truck rumbled past, shaking the windows faintly. I looked at the small evidence bag on Wolfe's desk. A shard of glass, a sliver of plastic, hardly impressive. But in the narrow groove of a sliding door, pale dust had recorded violence, haste, and the limits of control. And somewhere, in someone's carefully ordered life, a missing phone had become louder in absence than it ever was in use. Chapter 9. The only person who'd fix it. Wolfe pulled building access logs and elevator records. Caleb's floor had one odd visit. Darla late night. No maintenance ticket. She claimed she came to check a leak complaint. But there was no wet spot, no bucket, no reason. Then Wolfe asked a riddle. Who sees a dead man and thinks, this room is messy? Nina would freeze, Jace would flee, Darla would clean, and Darla's shoes, in Wolfe's mind, already wore that pale shaft dust. The advantage of a man like Nero Wolfe is not that he moves quickly. It is that he does not move at all until he knows precisely where to place his weight. The morning after the door track surrendered its confession, Wolfe remained in his office and refused to leave. That alone made Inspector Kramer uneasy. You're not coming down to headquarters? Kramer demanded over the telephone. No, Wolfe said. Send the access logs. You think I've got clerks for you? I think, Wolfe replied evenly. You have a murder that benefits from clarity. The logs arrived by courier 2 hours later. Building keycard access, elevator override entries, service corridor door records. Wolfe had them spread across his desk like a cartographer charting unfamiliar territory. Archie, he said, without looking up. Coffee, I supplied it. He read in silence, one heavy finger tracing timestamps. The building required electronic cards for after-hours access to tenant floors. Management possessed master credentials. Maintenance had restricted codes tied to service requests. Trustees had standard access during business hours only. Caleb Rusk's death occurred between 10 and midnight. At 10:42 p.m., an access override registered for the trust's floor. At 10:43, the elevator recorded a master credential from the lobby to the trust level. At 11:18, the same credential descended. No maintenance ticket filed, no service request logged. Wolfe tapped the page once. Mrs. Darleven, he said. I leaned over his shoulder. She claims she responded to a leak complaint, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied, and yet no complaint exists. Maybe it wasn't logged, I offered. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Professional's log. He turned a page. Additionally, he said, there was no maintenance card activation that evening from Mr. Holton or his assistants. So Jace wasn't officially there, I said. Correct. And Nina, I asked. No building record, Wolfe said. She lacks hors access. I considered that. If she had a key from Rusk, she would not require the elevator override, Wolfe said. We sat in silence. Finally, Wolfe leaned back. Archie, he said, telephone Mrs. Venn, invite her. Invite, I repeated. Yes. I called. Darleven agreed with polished reluctance to visit that afternoon. When she arrived, the lemon scent preceded her like a signature. She wore a tailored grey suit and an expression of mild offense at the inconvenience. I trust this is necessary, she said as she took the red leather chair. Entirely, Wolfe replied. He did not offer coffee. Mrs. Venn, he began. On the night of Caleb Rusk's death, you accessed the trust floor at 10:42 p.m. Her posture remained impeccable. Yes, she said. I told the police there was a leak complaint. From whom? Wolfe asked. She hesitated just a fraction. From a tenant. Name, Wolfe said. I don't recall, she replied. Wolfe's gaze did not shift. There is no maintenance ticket. It was informal, she said smoothly. A trustee mentioned dampness. Where? Wolfe asked. In the corridor near Rusk's office. There was no wet spot, Wolfe said. She smiled faintly. Perhaps it dried. There was no bucket. Wolfe continued. No towel, no odor. Her smile thinned. You are very attentive, she said. Yes, Wolfe agreed. Silence stretched. Finally, he asked, did you enter Mr. Rusk's office? She folded her hands. The door was open. And you entered, Wolfe said. Yes. And you saw him, Wolfe said. She held his gaze. Yes, I live, Wolfe asked. A pause. Number, the word landed softly. And your first thought? Wolfe asked. Her chin lifted slightly, that something terrible had occurred. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Not, he said quietly, that the room was messy. Her composure flickered for the first time. I don't know what you mean, she said. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, a rare movement. I will phrase it as a riddle, he said. Who sees a dead man and thinks, this room is messy? The question hung in the air like smoke. Darleven did not answer immediately. I watched her hands. They remained folded, but the thumbs pressed together more tightly. Wolfe continued, conversationally. Miss Cade would freeze. Mr. Holton would flee. But you, he let it rest. Her voice cooled. You are suggesting that I rearranged a crime scene? I am suggesting, Wolfe said, that you possess the temperament to fix what displeases you. Her eyes flashed. I manage a building, she said sharply. I maintain standards. Yes, Wolfe said. Standards. He rose, slowly, deliberately, and crossed to the sideboard. From a small envelope, he withdrew the evidence bag containing the keycap fragment. He set it on the desk between them. This was found in the closet door track of Mr. Rusk's office, he said. Her gaze dropped to it despite herself. Along with tempered glass, Wolfe continued. From a phone, she said nothing. You accessed the floor at 10:42, Wolfe said. Rusk's estimated time of death falls within that window. There was no leak. There was no maintenance. There was, however, a dead man. Her composure began to fracture at the edges. I did not kill him, she said. I did not say you did, Wolfe replied. Clever. You saw him, Wolfe said. And what did you do? She drew a breath. I called the police. After how long? Wolfe asked. Immediately, she said. Wolfe's gaze hardened. The logs show your departure at 11:18, he said. That is 35 minutes. Her eyes widened slightly. I was in shock, she said. Shock does not align furniture, Wolfe replied. She went still. He pressed. The couch was moved, the table adjusted, the glass washed, the trash emptied. Her lips parted, then closed. You are a woman who cannot abide disorder, Wolfe said. Your keys line up like soldiers. Your office
Near
smells of
clothes
lemon.
and the umbilical
You wipe
cord of
surfaces
his
personally.
watch.
Her
A
breathing
jeweler
quickened.
shows Wolfe a watch that
And
only
in
arrives
that
when
office,
someone touches
Wolfe
it.
continued,
Open the
you
back
saw
of
not
the
only
watch.
death,
Here
but
thin
mess.
wire, like
Her voice
the watch is
trembled
tied
now,
to a pulse.
anger and fear
Once you feel
colliding.
it, let's figure it
I
out
could not leave it
slowly.
like that, she
Hope
said.
you liked
There
it.
it was.
Comment
The
next
first
and I will
crack.
drop part 2.
You found him fallen awkwardly, Wolfe said quietly. You moved him. I did not kill him, she repeated. But you adjusted him, Wolfe said. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She began, then stopped. Kramer, who had been silent in the doorway, stepped forward. Mrs. Venn, he said gruffly. Did you move the body? She closed her eyes briefly. Yes. The word was barely audible. Kramer exhaled sharply. You understand that's obstruction, he said. She opened her eyes. He looked. She began, undignified. Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. And you prefer dignity? Yes, she whispered. And the phone? Wolfe asked. Her eyes flickered. What phone? She said reflexively. Wolfe's gaze did not soften. The one you smashed. Her composure shattered. I did not. The shard in the track, Wolfe said calmly. The nick in the desk, the broken keycap. You struck it. Her breath hitched. I didn't know what was on it, she said suddenly. Kramer's head snapped toward her. What was on it? He demanded. She shook her head. I saw messages, she said, from Daniel, about irregular transfers, about trustees skimming funds. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Which trustee? He asked. Silence. Which trustee? He repeated. Her hands trembled now. Me, she said. The room went still. I manage the building, she said rapidly. The trust leases at a favorable rate. We structured certain allocations. Daniel misunderstood. He discovered. Wolfe corrected. She shook her head. It was temporary, she insisted. Funds shifted. I would have replaced them. With whose money? Kramer asked harshly. She flinched. I didn't kill Caleb, she said. I went to speak to him. He threatened exposure. We argued. He said Daniel had kept copies. And then, Wolfe asked quietly. He turned, she said. He was angry. He stumbled. Wolfe's gaze did not waver. You struck him, he said. Her silence was answer enough. With what? Kramer demanded. The paperweight, she whispered. Rowe moved immediately to bag the heavy glass object on Rusk's desk. I didn't mean to, she said, tears now breaking through. He fell. It happened so fast. And then, Wolfe said, you fixed it. She nodded helplessly. I couldn't leave him like that, she said. It looked chaotic. I moved him. I straightened the room. And the phone, Wolfe pressed. I saw Daniel's messages, she said. He had evidence. Caleb had it too. I panicked. So you smashed it, Wolfe said. Yes, and hid the pieces in the maintenance void, Wolfe continued. Yes, and intended to retrieve them later. She nodded weakly. Kramer stepped forward. You're under arrest, he said. As Rowe guided her toward the door, Wolfe spoke once more. Mrs. Venn, he said. She paused. You believed you could repair murder the way you repair a corridor, he said, with Polish. Her shoulders shook. I only wanted it neat, she whispered. Yes, Wolfe said softly. That was the mistake. They led her out. The room felt strangely larger afterward. Kramer turned to Wolfe. You had her pegged from the dust, he said. From the temperament, Wolfe corrected. And Nina, Rowe asked. Innocent of murder, Wolfe said, though not of poor taste in company. Kramer snorted. Alton, Rowe asked. Grease does not sanitize, Wolfe said. We returned to the brownstone as dusk settled. Wolfe lowered himself into his chair with a sound that might have been fatigue or satisfaction. You see, Archie, he said. The critical question was not who could kill, but who would fix, I said. Yes. I leaned back at my desk. A dead man is messy, I said. Only to the wrong mind, Wolfe replied. Outside, the city continued in its usual disorder, sirens, horns, the perpetual shuffle of lives colliding. Inside the brownstone, order reasserted itself naturally, without being forced. And somewhere in a cell, Darla Venn would be contemplating the one thing she could not align. The fact that dust remembers. Chapter 10. The dust that didn't forget, expanded to full length. If there is one thing Nero Wolfe distrusts more than a confession, it is a confession that comes too easily. Darla Venn had confessed. She had admitted the blow, the rearrangement, the smashed phone, the forged invoices. Inspector Kramer had enough for indictment twice over. Yet Wolfe insisted upon one final assembly in his office on West 35th Street. Why? I asked him that morning. Because, he said, adjusting a paperweight to perfect alignment, a room must be returned to its proper proportions. He did not mean the office. They came in reluctant procession. Inspector Kramer, red-faced but grimly satisfied. Lieutenant Rowe, efficient and curious. Jace Holton, who smelled faintly of oil and wounded pride. Nina Cade, pale but steadier now, as if grief had finally arrived in its proper order. 2 trustees from the Kessler Trust, accompanied by counsel who wore his skepticism like a tie and Darla Venn. She entered under escort, posture erect, expression composed, lemon scent faint but persistent. Even in custody, she had found a way to appear as though she were hosting an unpleasant but necessary meeting. Wolfe did not stand. Mrs. Venn, he said evenly. Be seated. She did. Her eyes moved about the office. They paused, almost involuntarily, on Wolfe's own key rack mounted near the door. It was orderly, yes, but not ritualized, functional, unadorned. That glance told Wolfe more than a paragraph would have. He folded his hands. We will proceed, he said. He began at the beginning. Daniel Hart, he said, was an accountant whose virtue lay in numbers. He believed numbers should add up. The trustees shifted. He discovered irregularities in the Kessler Trust's financial relationship with the building it occupied. He did not look at Darla yet. Specifically, inflated rent adjustments and forged repair invoices routed through building management. The attorney began to speak. Kramer silenced him with a glance. Mr. Hart copied documentation, Wolfe continued. He placed those copies in a rectangular box. That box left a dust shadow in his desk drawer and on his dresser at home. Rowe nodded. When Mr. Hart died, Wolfe said, his apartment was sanitized. He paused. Books aligned, photographs squared, surfaces wiped in straight, deliberate strokes, the sink bleached, the rug beaten, but the couch unmoved. Nina Cade's hands tightened in her lap. Yet dust gathered in corners, behind books removed and replaced, beneath furniture shifted. Wolfe's gaze shifted to Darla. You removed the box. She said nothing. You cleaned the apartment not to honor him, Wolfe said quietly, but to stage a narrative. Kramer's jaw tightened. Mr. Hart's death was arranged to resemble suicide. The silence acknowledged the truth. But Wolfe continued, you could not eliminate the habit that betrays you, straight-line wiping, selective blindness to hidden grooves. He leaned back. Caleb Rusk became aware. Rowe turned a page in his notebook.
Wolfe and
He
the middle of a
confronted you.
board of wristwatch.
Darla's composure
A jeweler
thinned,
shows Wolfe
just
a watch
perceptibly.
that only runs
Yes,
when someone
she said.
touches it.
He threatened
On the
exposure.
back, there was a
Yes,
hair-thin
and you went
wire
to his
that
office that night.
the watch is tied to
Yes,
a person.
under the pretense of a
You
leak.
built that figure
She
out
said
the
nothing.
story.
There was no
I
leak,
hope you
Wolfe
liked
said.
it. Comment
The
next,
access logs
and I
show
will
no
do part
maintenance
2.
ticket. Your master credential activated the elevator at 10:42 p.m. He placed the log on the desk. You remained 30. 5 minutes. Her breathing changed. In that interval, Wolfe said, you argued. She closed her eyes briefly. He was hysterical, she said. He accused me. He accused you correctly, Wolfe replied. Kramer interjected. You hit him. Yes, she said flatly. The word did not tremble this time. With the glass paperweight, Wolfe said. He fell near his desk. She swallowed. It was chaotic, she whispered. Yes, Wolfe agreed. You could not tolerate that. Number, you moved him. Yes, from where he fell to where he would appear less offensive. Her hands trembled. You dragged him to the coffee table. In doing so, you scraped the table legs across the floor, creating a scuff. Rowe held up a photograph. You then moved the couch forward exactly 1 inch to conceal that scuff. Holton exhaled audibly. The clean rectangle beneath the couch revealed its former position, Wolfe said. Dust preserves memory. He lifted a small evidence bag. Fresh felt pads were applied to the table legs to prevent further marks. Kramer nodded grimly. You washed the glass and replaced it precisely on its dust ring. He let that settle. And then you found the phone. Darla's composure cracked again. I saw Daniel's messages, she said. He had copied everything. Yes, Wolfe said. And you panicked. She nodded. You struck the phone against the desk, Wolfe said. Tempered glass fractured. The case snapped. He displayed the keycap and glass shard. These were found in the closet door track, embedded in pale construction dust. He turned to Holton. Where does such dust accumulate? In the service corridor outside the boiler room, Holton said. And Mrs. Venn stores cleaning supplies there, Wolfe added. Holton nodded reluctantly. Wolfe faced Darla. You carried that dust on your shoes, he said. You knelt to hide the broken phone fragments in the maintenance void behind the closet panel. When you slid the door shut, the track compressed dust over debris. She wept openly now. I meant to retrieve it later, she said. You meant to finish the cleaning, Wolfe replied. The attorney attempted a protest. Kramer silenced him again. You emptied the trash in the break room, Wolfe continued, to remove any remaining fragments. Rowe confirmed with a nod. And you believed, Wolfe said, that if the room looked orderly, the truth would align accordingly. Darla shook her head weakly. I was protecting everything, she said. You were protecting yourself, Kramer corrected. Wolfe resumed his seat. The essential distinction, he said calmly, is psychological. He looked around the room. Miss Cade's neatness is defensive, anxiety manifested as wipes and lint rollers. Mr. Holton's disorder is occupational. Oil and grit are tools, not statements. Holton grunted in agreement. Only Mrs. Venn equates disorder with failure, Wolfe said. Only she sees a dead man and thinks first of furniture. The room was utterly silent. Nina spoke softly. I would have called the police immediately. Yes, Wolfe said. Holton added. I'd have run. Yes. Wolfe turned back to Darla. You rearranged not merely the room, he said. You rearranged events. You staged suicide. You curated aftermath. Her voice was barely audible. I didn't mean to kill him. No, Wolfe said gently. You meant to correct him. Kramer stepped forward. Mrs. Venn, you are under arrest for the murders of Daniel Hart and Caleb Rusk, as well as fraud and obstruction. She rose slowly. As she was escorted to the door, she paused. You think dust makes you clever, she said. Wolfe regarded her evenly. No, he said. It makes me attentive. She left. The trustees departed with promises of audits. Holton left muttering about pipes and bad luck. Nina lingered a moment. I didn't know, she said. I know, Wolfe replied. She nodded and went. Kramer remained briefly. You enjoy the lecture, he grumbled. I enjoy proportion, Wolfe said. Kramer snorted. See you at trial. He left. At last it was only Wolfe and me. The office regained its natural symmetry. You always have to square the room, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Even when it's already square, especially then. I leaned back. Funny thing about dust, I said. What? Wolfe asked. It doesn't care how expensive the building is. No, Wolfe agreed. It does not. He rose, signaling closure. Archie, he said, inform Fritz that dinner may proceed. Justice should not delay the souffle. Yes, sir. As I climbed the stairs, I glanced back at the office. Neat, calm, unstaged. The city outside roared with its usual disregard, but somewhere in a maintenance corridor still faintly coated with pale dust. A sliding door groove had preserved what a careful woman could not erase. Rooms can be cleaned. Dust remembers, and Nero Wolfe listens.